The slap cracked through the courtroom so sharply, even the flag seemed to flinch. Mom's glasses slid across the polished floor. Dad's voice followed, cold and pleased. "You've been useless your whole life." For one breath, the room held still. I stood, my duty belt tugged as I rose. I removed my police cap and set it on the table like a quiet gavel. "Your Honor," I said. "Steady, check the last page." Dad turned and the color abandoned his face. That moment had roots. I was 8 when I learned silence can be a weapon. The kitchen smelled like burned toast and coffee left too long on the stove. Winter tapped the window with thin fingers. Mom moved carefully, sleeves tugged down to hide the purple moon on her wrist. She set 2 bowls of cereal on the table and folded a smile over the ache. "Eat before it gets soggy," she said. Dad came in heavy-booted, a weather system in a flannel shirt. "Where's my thermos?" he demanded. "On the counter," Mom answered. He snatched it, eyes on her sleeve. "Clumsy again?" "I dropped a pan," she said. He snorted. "Figures." His gaze skimmed me and my sister Leah. "I'm not raising 2 princesses who can't do a thing." He shoved the toast so the crumbs jumped. "Burned," he said. "Can't even make breakfast." When the door slammed behind him, the house exhaled. Mom dabbed the counter with a napkin as if she could erase what lived in the air. "He's just tired," she whispered. "He doesn't have to be cruel," I said. "Finish up," she answered. "School starts soon." The wind bit our ankles on the walk to school. Leah's bootlaces trailed like black tails. "Is Mom okay?" she asked. "She's tough," I told her. In a shop window, a TV showed a police officer lifting yellow tape. The officer's face was calm. No shouting, no flinch. Something inside me clicked like a lock finding home. That afternoon, the house smelled like cornbread. Mom touched my cheek. "How was school, Anna?" "We read about Harriet Tubman," I said. "Brave doesn't have to be loud." "You're right," Mom replied. Dad came home late and drunk. His keys fumbled the lock. He looked at the cornbread, then at Mom. "You trying to make up for this morning?" "It's cornbread," she said. "You like it with honey?" "I like a woman who knows her place." His hand shot out and slapped the plate from her grip. It shattered. Leah screamed. I watched crumbs skitter across the tile like yellow confetti from a party no one wanted. "Stop," I said. But it drew a line. He turned, surprised a child had dared to exist. "What?" "Stop," he laughed, warm beer mean. "Hear that? She thinks she's a cop." Mom stepped between us so fast her shadow split me. "Please," she told him, "go lie down." "I'll clean this." He shouldered past. Mom crouched and picked ceramic teeth from the floor. I knelt beside her. "You don't have to take this." She gathered shards until their edges bit her skin. "You and Leah need a roof," she murmured. "If I leave, where do we go?" I had no answer that wasn't a fairy tale. So I helped. We cleaned the kitchen, breathing in rhythm, like swimmers under the same wave. At night, I made lists. Facts, feelings, control. Fact, Mom was kind. Feeling, I was afraid. Control, I could learn to be calm. I could become the person who arrives and says enough. On Sundays, when Dad snored through the afternoon, Mom took us to the park. Leah pumped her legs on the swing. I timed the arcs. Bruises changed colors like sunsets, plum to brown to yellow to almost gone. Each time a mark faded, a new one arrived, a season that refused to end. Once a cruiser rolled by. A woman officer lifted 2 fingers from the wheel in a small salute. It felt like a key pressed into my palm. Someday I decided I would wear calm. I told Mom while we folded laundry. "I want to be a cop," I said. "I want to be the person who shows up and says enough." She held a towel halfway, weighing me with the gravity she used for real things. "It's dangerous," she said. "But danger doesn't scare you. Seeing people hurt and pretending you can't do anything, that scares you." Her seeing me clearly made my eyes sting. "I'll study hard," I said. "Run every morning, learn the law." She smoothed my hair. "Then do it. But promise me something." "What?" "When you're strong, really strong, use it to protect. Don't become the thing that made you strong." I promised. Children make promises like paper boats. Most sink. Mine didn't. It rode every flood in that house. Slammed doors, muttered insults, apologies Mom made to the air. It rode the nights I held Leah in the closet while Dad prowled the hall for a fight he could win. It rode until a badge and duty belt replaced the fear I'd worn like a second skin. Years later in that courtroom, when I stood and set my cap down, the paper boat had become steel. But the forging began here. Burned toast, warm cornbread, park swings, laundry, and low promises. People think revenge is loud. The truth is quieter. It's a girl learning the weight of a brim and the sound a key makes when it turns. It's patient stocking shelves no one notices until the door opens and the person you've been building walks through. I grew into the quiet. I learned to take notes, to hold the right word like a tool instead of a blade. I watched Mom place kindness like sandbags against rising water. I saw the cost of it in her hands. So when the slap landed in court and the room froze, I wasn't just a daughter. I was a promise kept. Mom was the kind of woman who could stretch $1 until it squeaked. She carried her bruises like secret heirlooms hidden under sleeves brushed with powder. To the outside world, she was quiet, maybe even frail, but I knew the truth. She was steel that had learned to bend without breaking. She endured because of us. At night, after Dad stumbled into bed, smelling of whiskey and cigarette ash, she stayed up under the dim lamplight, mending Leah's torn skirt or ironing my uniform. The iron hissed and whispered, her eyes half closed, but her hands steady. "I just want you girls to have better," she'd murmur when she caught me watching. Better. The word clung to me. But better meant sacrifice. "Why don't you leave him?" I asked once, voice quivering. I must have been 12. She froze over the sink, dishwater swirling around her wrists. For a moment, her back was a mountain I couldn't climb. Then she turned, face softened but eyes wet. "Because leaving isn't free, Anna. He'll take the house. He'll drag you girls through court. Sometimes staying is the only way to keep the storm inside these walls." I hated that answer, but I understood. Leah needed braces. I needed books. Mom bore the fist so we could carry pens. School was my sanctuary. I stayed late for debate team, track practice, anything that kept me out of the house. But every time the bus pulled into our street, my stomach clenched. Would Dad be waiting with a sneer? Would Mom be hiding another bruise? Leah once asked, "Do you think she still loves him?" "No," I said too quickly, then softer. "She just loves us more." The affair began like smoke you don't notice until the room is clouded. Dad shaved more, bought new shirts, smelled of cologne too sharp for the factory floor. His voice changed, slick when he talked on the phone. Mom folded laundry with trembling fingers, her lips pressed thin. She knew. Wives always know. Yet she said nothing. She endured again, holding silence as though it could anchor the family. I hated him more for it. Not just the cheating, the humiliation, the way he strutted in late, whistling like a rooster while Mom served him dinner as if dignity weren't bleeding out at her feet. One night, Leah burst into tears over algebra. Dad barked, "Figures, useless like your mother." Mom crossed the room before I could move. She sat beside Leah, arms circling her shoulders. "You are not useless," she whispered firmly. "You are light. You are mine." Leah leaned into her and I saw it. Mom wasn't powerless. She fought in small ways, shielding, affirming, planting seeds of worth that Dad couldn't uproot. When I graduated high school, Dad didn't show. Mom sat in the bleachers with a bouquet of gas station carnations, eyes shining as if they were roses. "You did it, Anna," she said, her voice cracking. "Every step you take is proof it wasn't for nothing." I clenched the diploma, heart splitting. For nothing? No, for everything. That night, while Leah slept, I whispered to Mom, "I'm going to the academy. I'll be a cop." Her breath hitched. "Anna, that's dangerous." "I know, but it's my way out, and one day I'll have the strength to protect you, too." Her eyes brimmed. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her palm was rough, scarred by years of scrubbing, sewing, surviving. "Then promise me one thing." "What?" "When you stand in that strength, don't use it to destroy. Use it to heal what's left of us," I promised. But inside I knew healing sometimes required fire. Years passed. I wore the uniform. I learned the law, the weight of a baton, the restraint of silence. But at home, Mom was still enduring. Dad's mistress had sharpened her claws, whispering poison. He began talking of selling the house, of starting fresh with her. "I can take losing him," Mom said through tears. But losing you girls home, that I can't bear. I looked at her then, shoulders bowed, hair streaked with gray far too soon. She had given her life to shield us, and he wanted to strip her of even the roof. That night I began collecting things, receipts, photos, witness statements, quietly, methodically, not as a daughter. As an officer? Because Mom had endured enough. The night it all came crashing down didn't start with thunder, but with the smell of cheap cologne and cigarette smoke that clung to Dad's jacket when he staggered through the front door. I was visiting home on a short break from the academy. Leah was doing homework at the kitchen table. Mom stood at the stove stirring soup that smelled of onions and garlic, her sleeves pulled low as always. Dad tossed a folded packet of papers onto the counter with a grunt. "Sign it." Mom turned, ladle trembling in her hand. "What is this?" "Divorce," he said flatly. "The girls are grown. You're not needed anymore." Leah dropped her pencil. "What?" Dad didn't even look at her. "Don't make it dramatic. It's overdue." Mom unfolded the pages with shaking fingers. Her lips moved silently over the words. Then she pressed them together as if trying to hold herself together with sheer will. "I don't want this," she whispered. Dad's laugh was cruel, oily. "Don't want it? Since when do you get to want anything? You think I'm asking? You'll sign." That night I followed her to the back porch. She sat on the steps, arms folded tight. The moonlight traced the lines of exhaustion etched into her face. "I can't fight him, Anna," she said softly. "If he wants the divorce, he'll take it all, the house, the savings. I don't have the strength." "You don't have to fight him alone," I said. "You have me." Her smile was faint, weary. "You're my strength, but I can't drag you into this." I wanted to shout that she had dragged me into it years ago when I was a child hiding from his fists. But I bit it back. Instead, I said, "He won't win. Not this time." Inside, the phone rang. Dad's voice slithered through the screen door, low and eager. Sweet words he had never given Mom spilled into the receiver. He was talking to her, the mistress. My fists clenched so tightly the bones ached. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. He returned home with the mistress in tow, brazen, painted lips smirking as she leaned against our doorway like she belonged there. Mom froze in the living room, wringing her hands. Leah fled upstairs, eyes wide with shame and fury. Dad waved the papers again. "Sign or I'll make sure you get nothing. Not the house, not a cent. You'll be lucky if I let you keep your clothes." The mistress sneered, her hand curling around his arm. "Do it, darling. End this farce." Mom swayed on her feet, pale as paper. Her voice broke when she whispered, "Please, don't do this in front of the girls." "Girls," he scoffed. "They're old enough to know their mother's worthless." That word, worthless, struck like a blade. I had heard it my whole life. But hearing it now from his lips, sharpened by another woman's poison, ignited something raw and dangerous inside me. I stepped forward. "Enough," he turned, eyes narrowing. "You don't tell me what to do." "Maybe not before," I said, shoulders squared. "But I'm not 8 years old anymore." That night, when Mom finally collapsed in her room, sobbing into the pillow, I sat awake at the kitchen table. The divorce papers lay crumpled beside me. I smoothed them out, studied them, every line of fine print, and I made a decision. If he wanted a fight, I would give him one. Not as his daughter. As an officer, I began collecting everything. Old photographs of bruises, hospital receipts, police call logs, even the neighbors' statements about the screaming fights. I kept it all in a folder locked in my Academy-issued case file. The time for silence was over. The courthouse smelled of polish and dust, like old wood soaked with decades of anger and hope. Sunlight slanted through tall windows, illuminating dust motes that floated as if suspended in judgment. Mom sat beside me at the plaintiff's table, her hands folded tight around a tissue that had already twisted into ropes. She wore her Sunday dress, blue with faded flowers, chosen to make her look respectable, though her eyes betrayed sleepless nights. Across the aisle, Dad leaned back in his chair with the swagger of a man who believed the law bent to him. His mistress sat beside him, legs crossed, a thin smile curling her lips. She wore perfume so sharp it carried across the room, cutting through the scent of paper and ink. The bailiff called order and the judge entered, robes flowing like shadow. Everyone stood. The proceedings began. Lawyers droned, papers shuffled. But what I remember most is Dad's voice. Confident, practiced cruelty laced with fake charm. "Your Honor," he said, gesturing toward Mom. "This woman has contributed nothing. I paid the bills. I kept the house. She's had decades of free lodging and meals. Now she'll walk away with what she deserves. Nothing." Mom flinched as though the words themselves struck her. Her tissue tore between her fingers. The judge turned to her. "Do you have anything to say, ma'am?" Her lips parted. For a moment, I thought she might speak, but then her shoulders curled inward the way they had 1,000 times at home. I just want peace," she whispered. Dad smirked. "Exactly my point. She has no fight in her." Laughter, sharp and low, rippled from the mistress. Halfway through, Dad grew bolder. He leaned across the table, his voice carrying too loudly. "You hear that, boys? She's admitting she's useless." Mom shrank into her chair, eyes fixed on the floor. Her fingers trembled as she signed the first of the documents. The pen quivered against paper. Then came the moment. She reached for the second page. Dad leaned over suddenly, his face inches from hers, and in a motion so swift it seemed practiced, he slapped her. The crack ricocheted off the courtroom walls. Gasps erupted. The pen clattered from her hand. "You've been useless your whole life," he spat. The bailiff stepped forward, but the judge held up a hand, shock hardening into cold authority. Silence smothered the room. Mom's breath came ragged, her cheek flaming red. Yet even then, she picked up the pen with trembling fingers, as though determined to finish, to surrender if it would end the storm. And I couldn't sit any longer. My chair scraped back. The sound was sharp. Every head turned. I rose, spine straight, the years of training pressing through my stance. My hand lifted the cap from the table, fingers curling around its brim. Slowly, deliberately, I set it down before me. "Your Honor," I said, voice even but loud enough to carry. "Please check the last page." The mistress's smile faltered. Dad's eyes snapped to me, fury and sudden unease warring in his expression. "What are you doing?" he growled. "Sit down." But the judge's hand was already flipping through the stack of papers. My evidence was there, tucked where only I knew to place it. Photographs of bruises, sworn statements, receipts from hospital visits, copies of reports I had pulled through official channels. Years of silence distilled into ink and signatures. The judge's brow furrowed. "What is this?" I swallowed the fire in my throat, keeping my voice calm. "The truth, Your Honor," a murmur spread through the room like wind through dry leaves. Dad shifted in his seat, suddenly less sure of himself. His hand twitched as though to reach for the papers, but the bailiff stepped closer. His mistress's perfume seemed to sour, the sweetness turning rancid in the heated air. For the first time, Mom looked up. Confusion, hope, and disbelief all flickered across her face. She stared at me. Her lips parted, but no words escaped. I gave her the smallest nod. "It's okay. You're not alone." The judge cleared his throat, eyes scanning each line with growing gravity. "These are serious allegations. Mr. Callahan, you'll answer to them before this court." Dad's smirk collapsed. "This is nonsense. Fabrications." His voice cracked on the last word. I stood straighter. "Every statement is verified, every photograph authenticated. The law does not ignore abuse, no matter how long it's been buried." For a long moment after the judge's voice fell silent, no one breathed. Then Dad moved. He slammed both palms against the table, rattling the glasses of water. His chair screeched back. His face burned red, lips curled in a sneer. "You think you're something now? Wearing that uniform? You're nothing but my disobedient little girl." The mistress reached for his sleeve, but he shook her off. He stalked across the aisle toward Mom. "Sign the papers," he hissed. "You don't get to embarrass me in front of all these people." The judge raised a hand. "Mr. Callahan," but Dad didn't hear. His rage had deafened him. His arm whipped back, and before anyone could stop him, he struck her again. The crack echoed like a rifle shot. Gasps rippled through the room. The bailiff lunged forward. I was already moving. My chair toppled as I stood. I stepped between Dad and Mom, shoulders squared, pulse iron steady. "Enough," I said. The word wasn't loud, but it cut deeper than a shout. The room hushed, waiting. Dad's eyes met mine, surprise. Flickering there, his jaw worked. "Get out of my way." "No," I answered. The bailiff caught his arm, but he jerked free, still glaring at me. His hand rose, the same hand I had seen raised too many times as a child. But this time I didn't flinch. "This is a courtroom," I said, my voice sharp as steel, "and the law will answer for what you've done." He froze, thrown off by the authority in my tone. I wasn't his daughter in that moment. I was the officer the badge had made me. The judge's gavel cracked. "Bailiff, restrain him." The bailiff snapped cuffs over Dad's wrists. He twisted, spat curses, but the fight was gone from his eyes. He looked smaller, shackled not just by steel, but by the weight of his own unraveling. I turned back to Mom. She sat trembling, her tissue shredded to confetti in her lap. Her cheek was flushed where his hand had landed. I knelt beside her, speaking softly so only she could hear. "It's over, Mom. You don't have to take it anymore." Her eyes filled, tears spilling onto the blue flowers of her dress. She reached for my hand, gripping it with surprising strength. "Anna," she whispered. "You stood up." I swallowed hard. "For both of us." The judge cleared his throat, addressing the courtroom. "This court will not ignore what has been brought to light. The evidence presented is compelling and will be entered into record. Further proceedings will determine division of assets. But in the meantime, protective measures will be enforced for the plaintiff." Dad struggled against the cuffs, his voice cracking now with something closer to panic. "You think this changes anything? You think she wins because you wear a badge?" I turned to him, calm as stone. "This isn't about winning. This is about truth, and you can't bury it anymore." For the first time, Mom lifted her chin. Her voice was faint but steady when she said, "I won't be afraid anymore." It was the bravest sentence I had ever heard. The judge nodded solemnly. "That is your right, ma'am, and this court will uphold it." The following weeks were a blur of hearings, signatures, and endless paperwork. Dad fought tooth and nail, but each piece of evidence was another door closed to him. The mistress stopped showing up after the recordings were played in open court. His swagger shrank into muttered denials that no one believed. Finally, the verdict came. The judge's words fell like a steady drumbeat. The house awarded to Mom. Joint accounts split fairly. Restitution owed for medical expenses long buried under excuses. Most importantly, a permanent protective order. He could no longer come within 200 feet of her. When the gavel fell, Mom pressed her face into her hands and sobbed. Not from grief. From release. I leaned close. "It's over." She shook her head gently. "No, Anna. It's just beginning." On the day she received the deed to the house, she placed it on the kitchen table like it was sacred scripture. Her fingers brushed the embossed seal. "I never believed I'd hold this," she murmured. "You held us," I reminded her. "This is only proof." She looked at me then, eyes shimmering. I used to think endurance was weakness, but maybe it was strength waiting for its moment. I nodded. "And today, you got it." At night, I sometimes sat on the porch steps where she used to cry alone. The wood was weathered, but it no longer felt haunted. It felt like a sentry post. I thought about the little girl who once whispered, "Stop," in a kitchen filled with broken plates. She had grown into a woman who said, "Enough," in a courtroom filled with silence. And the difference wasn't just a badge or a uniform. It was a promise kept. The last time I saw Dad was across a courtroom months later. He looked older, smaller, diminished in a way I had never imagined possible. His eyes flicked to me once, but they slid away quickly, as though he couldn't bear the reflection staring back at him. Mom stood tall beside me. She didn't need to speak. Her silence was no longer submission. It was victory. People often imagine revenge as fire, loud, consuming. But true revenge, the kind that endures, is quieter. It's the silence of a woman who no longer trembles. The stillness of a daughter who no longer flinches. The calm after a storm when the sky clears and the house is still standing. That's what justice looked like for us. Not a shout. A silence. If you're listening now, maybe you've carried storms of your own. Shadows that whispered you were worthless. Voices that told you to stay small. Maybe you've endured more than anyone will ever know. I want you to remember this. Endurance is not weakness. It is the soil from which strength grows. And when the time comes, when the silence finally breaks, you will find that you were stronger than they ever believed. So take courage, hold on, and when the moment arrives, stand tall. Because sometimes the quietest victories are the loudest of all.